This is the Johnny Cleveland Podcast, all things Cleveland sports, with your host, John Suchan. Well, Happy New Year. It's the Johnny Cleveland Podcast. We are live here tonight watching a little bit of the college football Sugar Bowl. Right now, Georgia and Ole Miss. Ole Miss is driving here in the Sugar Bowl toward the end of the first. Good game. Probably one of the better games so far of all of the major bowl games in the last day. Again, this is the Fanatical Elves Network. This is my Johnny Cleveland show. Appreciate you guys tuning in. I know it's halftime, so come on over, watch us here live right now on the X, on YouTube, and Facebook. You can listen to us later on Apple, on Spotify, and anywhere you listen to your podcast. We are there, sporting the college gear today. Yeah, I've got the Hope College Flying Dutchman sweatshirt and my UB, University at Buffalo, not University of Buffalo, but University at Buffalo, representing where I went, my kids went to college. So shout out to my kids. Alec went to Hope College. I attended Hope College. And my daughter, Mariah, attended University at Buffalo, played basketball there too. And we're in that gear today. So we're just here talking. We're going to talk about the Brownies here in just a minute. They had their final game of the season against the Cincinnati Bungles down there in Cincinnati. But before we get to that, we're going to just review a little bit about what has happened this past week. The Browns are coming off of a big win in college sports. Last night, I live here in the Columbus area, and Ohio State, the Buckeyes struggled. And they lost, and they played like crap. And Ryan Day, again, reverted back to being Ryan Day. I've never been a fan of Ryan Day, and Ohio State has the most talented group of players on the planet every season because they always have the best recruiting classes, or one of the best year in and year out. They had a hell of a run last year. It is interesting. Some people are talking today about, would you have, people have said, the Buckeyes beat Michigan, that team up north. And here in Columbus, that's all we talk about. The Buckeyes are considered a pro team pretty much here in Columbus, and they treat them like that here. The TV local coverage is constant here about the Buckeyes. And so them losing to a Miami team last night, 24-14, was unexpected. It was funny. I listened today to a couple of the local media radio groups here, 97.1 here in Columbus. And of course, all the local guys are big Buckeye fans. That's fine, but they are, trying to spin it always. That's what you do, right? That's what you do on these podcasts, what you do on the radio. You try to spin it a little bit, but they got their asses handed to them. The Buckeyes were just outmatched at every point. They were not prepared for that game. And then there's the whole, they sat for 25 days, and who cares? They sat for 25 days because they were seeded as number 2 in the playoff picture. So they were seeded because they were supposed to be that good. They lost to an Indiana team, and Indiana rolled. I mean, they crushed Alabama earlier today, and Indiana is an interesting team. Their coach, Singenti, or I don't know how you say his last name, but he's unbelievable. And I'll give my props to Indiana. I still don't think a lot of Mendoza, the quarterback. I know some of you really want Mendoza as the new Cleveland Browns quarterback, but I'll stick with my Shedeur Sanders. But as far as the Buckeyes are concerned, and Ryan Day and everything with the Buckeyes. I think I heard today there were already 4 players that entered the portal for Ohio State. We'll see how many more. It's so interesting listening to some of these former college coaches like Nick Saban earlier today. He was talking about all the shenanigans in college sports and the NCAA, which is the NCAA is just a joke. There are no rules or reason for all these things that are happening right now, and it's out of control. Out of control. I heard they said this morning there were 120 players, starters in major teams across the college football landscape that have already entered the portal. 120. And they were talking about a game like tonight where Ole Miss is playing Georgia, and multiple coaches in the Ole Miss team are going to be moving over to LSU to as their coach. Lane Kiffin moved over to LSU. So there's that. It's just crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And it's funny because, you see all these games, they're filled to the brim with fans. But every year in college sports now, you can't get a foot feeling. You can't get behind these teams because they're changing so much. There's so many different players every year, and it's becoming worse and worse. Something needs to be done. It's out of control. You don't feel that closeness to a team that you root for because you don't know who the hell these players are. I mean, here in Ohio State, you got a few, the high profile kids, Jeremiah Smith, the quarterback saying, Julian saying, by the way, he looked, and I know some people are going to say, well, Jeremiah Smith, he missed his block, and Jeremiah or Julian saying in last night's game, that was just he should not have thrown that ball. And I know it's a bang bang play, but he's got 2 eyes. If he didn't see or anticipate, or he was just throwing it blindly, it was an awful interception. I mean, I give props to Miami. That's the other thing too. Why I don't like Ryan Day, and I don't know all the quotes, but there were some suggestions that Miami or Ohio State just didn't play their ball, and Miami kind of got lucky, which is absolutely ridiculous. Miami's defense was outstanding. They've been outstanding all season long. No one pays attention to them because they're down in Miami. There were a lot of other things that people were watching throughout the game last night, like Michael Irving, who retired or is like 65 years old, acting delusional on the sidelines for the Hurricanes. But shout out to good guy Bernie Kosar, who is a former. I don't know if he graduated. Bernie, did you graduate from Miami? He was a star quarterback for the Miami Hurricanes before he became a Cleveland Brown. So shout out to Bernie. I know he's out there on TikTok, and he's always so supportive. And he was honored the other day at the Browns' last home game, where he got the donation of the liver from a young man that died, and that family was celebrated at the Browns game very recently. So shout out to Bernie. I'm sure Bernie is happy that Miami won. Buckeye fans are not happy, and Buckeye fans are some of the whiniest crybabies across the planet. And I'm a Buckeye fan. I grew up and was raised here, and I know some of you might find that surprising considering I'm wearing UB and Hope College gear. But the problem with Ohio State is they're just too big sometimes, and that leads to fans of the Buckeyes to be not very realistic and overly cocky. I always talk about there was a game years ago. Um, my daughter played basketball, I said, like for the University of Buffalo, and there was a NCAA opening round of the tournament back in 2016, I believe. Yeah, the 2015-2016 season. Buffalo made it to the tournament, and they had to play Ohio State. They came down here to Columbus and played at the old St. John Arena. And I've probably told this story before, but the arena is filled with Buckeye fans, and I recall sitting behind a group of obnoxious older Buckeye fans who were very disrespectful to our Buffalo Bulls lady basketball team, women's basketball team. So it was very discouraging to hear obnoxious old people talk about something that they really don't know anything about. So I think at some point I reminded them that those other players on the other team, thus Buffalo, my daughter, have families and have parents like the one that was sitting behind them. So they didn't like that, but they needed to stop being so embarrassing as Buckeye fans. So there is that certain arrogance that Buckeye fans have, and for that reason, the rest of the country is loving the fact that the Buckeyes lost last night. The euphoria on ESPN, from some of the news reporters after the game and their conversation about what a wonderful game that was. It was a wonderful game for everybody but Buckeye fans around the world. And I'm the first guy that will say OHIO, but having gone to a school, Hope College, which is up in that state up north, I know it goes both ways. And that University of Michigan there, they are very pompous and arrogant as well. So and their fans are that too. So it does go both ways. But it is interesting here living in the area to see how Buckeye fans are taking it today. The good thing is for me, I'm a Buckeye fan, but I lived in Kansas for 26 years. I have children who went to colleges at different schools, so I'm a kind of a rounded college fan. All right, so let's pause here for a quick commercial break, and then we're going to talk about the Brownies game coming up on Sunday. We'll be right back. Hey, we are back here. It's finally halftime of the Georgia Ole Miss game. So if you're tuning in right now, you're on YouTube or you're on the X. Thanks for stopping and watching for a minute. We are also available on TikTok. You can listen to us later on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, anywhere you listen to your podcast. We are there. This is the Johnny Cleveland podcast. We are part of the Fanatical Elves Network. And I want to shout out to Hemisphere Coffee Roasters. If you go to our X page, you'll click on the link there. Amazing coffee company up there in Mechanicsburg, Ohio, just north here of Columbus. Go buy some coffee. You'll be supporting our podcast. Also, a shout out to the bar up there in Cleveland, Spotlight Cleveland. Great little bar. Have some family that help run that bar just 5 minutes to the west, on the west side, west of the stadium. So if you're looking for a place to hang out, go to a bar after a Browns game or an Indians or not a Guardians game later on, or even a Cavs game, stop over there. Spotlight Cleveland. Google them, look them up. Great little spot. So check them out. Did want to talk briefly before I move into the Browns that, one more thing with the college stuff going on. Earlier today, I made mention of this on my own social media posts and whatnot. The Oregon coach, Dan Lanning, what a freaking idiot. I know some of you could care less about Oregon, but I don't know if you caught what happened at the end of the game. This guy's a pompous ass. And, he doesn't give two he doesn't care less about some little measly fanatical elves network, but it's just ridiculous to see what he and his team did at the end of that game. And it got some publicity. It's out there in La La Land. You can go look it up. But basically what happened was at the end of the game, Oregon's playing Texas Tech. And it was, supposed to be a pretty good game, and it was pretty close for most of it. It was like 3-0 or 6-0, and then they got a touchdown. It was Oregon's up 13-0. There was the Orange Bowl down there in Florida. Eventually, they got another field goal, so they went up 16-0. They get the ball back with like 2 or 3 minutes to go. And I don't know where they started with the ball, but basically, when I tuned in, I had watched the beginning of the game and then parts in the middle, and I stopped and I came back and watched the last. Like there was under a minute. The clock was running, and they're inside like their 10 or their 15-yard line. And I think they had a timeout left or whatever. And Dan Lanning in the Oregon, they got down to like the goal line, and it became like third down and then fourth down. He called a timeout with like, I want to say 20 seconds, 19 seconds to go. The announcers, the sports announcers, the TV guys were like, okay, the game's over. And they're like, oh, wait, Dan Lanning's going to call a timeout. Why is he calling a timeout? That ass decided to run a play, and score another touchdown. So they won the game 23-0. What is wrong with you, Dan Lanning? And what is wrong with you coaches who are so boneheaded? You're just idiotic, unsportsmanlike, classless. It's absolutely crazy. I've been a coach for years. I was a coach for years. That's unacceptable. People, I read different reports on it, and it's interesting to see how people twist it. I think the New York Times, or somebody who wrote for the Times, spun something out later saying, "Oh, the aggressiveness of the Oregon coach is so interesting. He's always going for it on fourth down." Like, understand the situation. What bone do you have to pick with Texas Tech? I'd really like to know. I mean, I read a story a couple weeks at the beginning of the season, him, running the damn score up against Oklahoma State out there in Oklahoma State. They won with 69-3 or something. And he was having his quarterback, Dante Moore, who I don't care to have here in Cleveland. I know he's from Cleveland, and I know some of you want to draft him. They ran that score up. He's throwing bombs away in the third and fourth quarter of that game when they're up 40-0 against Oklahoma State. Dan Lanning is an idiot. And Dan Lanning, if you happen to listen to the Fanatical Elves Network, I hope you hear that, because I'm not the first person to probably tell you that to your face. It's stupid. It shows complete arrogance and pompousness, and it teaches your players absolutely nothing. If your players walk away from that talking about, well, we're always aggressive and I love my coach, and like, that's bull crap. And you're that absolutely completely unacceptable. And the fact that you did that, I lost every ounce of respect for your program as long as you're coaching there, because you just don't do that. You're up 16-0. Take a freaking knee. Take a freaking knee. I don't care if you're at the 1 yard line. Take the damn knee. Turn the ball over if you have to. That's fine. Give the ball back to Texas Tech. You're down 16-0 with 15 seconds to go in the game, or 16 seconds to go in the game. Texas Tech is not going to beat you. And you know that. Everybody in the world knew that. But you had to rub it in because you're an ass. All right. Finally, the Browns play on Sunday. And they've got an opportunity to get another win. They beat the Pittsburgh Squealers on Sunday, surprised a lot of people. They won that game 13-6. Shedeur Sanders had a respectable first half. The second half was not so grand, but the Browns defense was spectacular in that game. Carson Schwetzinger was playing basically on one leg. He played every down. The kid's got like 150,000 tackles on the season. Myles Garrett did not get his hopeful sack that people were thinking he would get and break the record. So now he's going to go down to Cincinnati and play Joe Burrow, and hopefully he gets it there. He's had 13 sacks against Burrow, or 12, something like that. It's the most sacks he's had against one quarterback. And if you listen to Joe Schmo yesterday in his press conference in Cincinnati, he basically said it's going to happen. It's like, so I think we're all expecting it to happen. And Cincinnati has a god awful offensive line. So I think that Myles will get an opportunity to get that sack. And I hope he gets several and really adds on to that grand record that he will hold maybe for a lifetime, that no one else will catch him. I think, and I told Lou this on Stirring the Pot show the other day, that I think he's more or less going after the Bruce Smith overall record of most sacks in a career, which I think Bruce Smith has something around 190. Myles is 120 or 119, and he's finishing up year 9. Bruce Willis, I'm sorry, Bruce Smith played 19 seasons. So Myles is on his way to getting that. And also, the other thing about this whole stupid, some people out there are just ridiculous with your takes. And in La La Land, you're just absolutely haters. You have nothing better to do with your lives, and you just spew this crap, like complain. And I even see personality, for the clicks, trying to talk, well, Myles didn't do it in 15 games like Michael Strahan, or 16 games like whatever the guy's name is in Pittsburgh. And yet you don't even look at the line. Yeah, okay, you're talking about games, great, but it within those games, there are the number of times that you go up against the pass formations for the opponent. And Miles, if you go back and look at stats, he's like 200 less snaps, 200 less snaps to get to where he's at right now to break the record. So throw the damn game stat out the window. I could care less. That is so much more impressive. 200 less attempts. He's crushing Watt. He's crushing Michael Strahan in that area, and that's the stat that matters. It does the game crap. Throw it out the window. So if you want to put an asterisk next to Miles' name, go ahead, do it. But you're a complete idiot and moron. So, and that's what I'll think about you for the rest of any of you out there that are spewing that crap and want to push Miles' record that he hopefully will get on Sunday down. Go right for it. Go and look at those stats before you start throwing out crap that you don't have any sense of. Um so we'll see what Miles does. I think he's gonna break the record. And like I said, I hope he gets 3 or 4, maybe even 5 sacks. He had a 5 sack game earlier in the year. So we'll see how he does. It should be decent weather down there in Cincinnati. Actually, I'm going to be going to the game with a colleague here, Joel Cade and I, who does What the Elf. We're going to go down there to Cincinnati for the game. Looking forward to that. It should be a fun time. And Joel is really good with his analytics and understanding of the linemen and the play, just football in general. And so I tune into his shows, but he can break it down with you, and all the things that he talks about with Myles Garrett. I mean, just a tremendous, talented NFL football player. He should be the MVP, is what Joel was saying earlier in his show. Before I leave you, I was reviewing some of the stats here for Shador. I know some of you are. That's the big. Well, there's two stories out there, obviously, that we're all paying attention to very closely. Shador obviously going to get his 7th start, playing his 8th game this season, and I wanted to review a couple stats just so you can see how he is compared to some other things going on. And then, is it Black Monday for Stefanski? Is Stefanski on his way out? Is he mutually parting ways with the Cleveland Browns after the game on Sunday? There's been a lot of speculation this week, and there are a lot of various news stories going around talking about this, that, or the other thing. Nobody really knows. And from people that I talk to and I listen to, they tell me that no one knows for sure other than Mr. Haslam and Mrs. Haslam. I think I've talked on a couple of these other programs with like Joel and Steve and other and Lou that I think we're all. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised again if Stefanski is fired. Do I want him to be fired? I've said probably yeah, because you've got 6 years and this whole thing about, well, he still hasn't had a quarterback is just BS to me. It makes no sense. You've had 6 seasons to be the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, and he's struggling. This team has struggled, and I know some people have said, well, he hasn't lost the locker, and Joel Platonio and other players still really want him. And Joel Platonio came out today in his press conference and said that part of his decision to play or not play will be dependent on if Stefanski comes back or not. So, I would miss Joel Bitonio. I think he's a great player, but if they fire or if he walks away mutually, Stefanski, then so long, Joel Bitonio. But I do think you know, it's been good to have Stefanski here for 6 years. I think he's done some good things, and I think I'm not disagreeing that a lot of the players do really respect Stefanski. But the problem is that you're not winning, and most people understand that too. That if you're in the NFL, you gotta win, and he's not winning. And he hasn't won the last several seasons. Yes, he's been coach of the year twice. Yes, his team has made it to the playoffs. We all have heard that around and around. And I think that's a that all is important what ends up happening. But there's just, I mean, I heard the other day or yesterday or today, some other national guy just came out and I've mentioned this on the show multiple times. It's fans are just fed up with Stefanski. This guy said that the fans hate Stefanski. I don't know if I hate Stefanski, but I'm fed up with him. And I think if you were to ask, 7 out of 10 people in a room of Browns fans, I think I mean, if you ask 10 people, 7 of those 10 people are going to say, I'm done with Stefanski. Honestly, there aren't too many Browns fans that I run into anymore that are happy with Stefanski. So, not that shouldn't completely matter, but I mentioned the other day to Joel on what the elf was that we're looking at this spanking new dome stadium coming down the line here in 2029. And after attending the Buffalo Bills game 2 weeks ago, where at least 60 to 70% of the stands were all Bills fans who traveled down from Buffalo. Good for you. But what an embarrassing moment in a home game to literally have the entire stadium be against you. I mean, it was crazy. When James Cook scored the first touchdown for Buffalo, you would have sincerely thought, I'm sitting up there in the upper deck, I couldn't believe it. The roar, the cheer from the Buffalo fans was tremendous. It was deafening. It was like you were at a Cleveland Browns home game when the Browns used to be good. So and that should be really embarrassing to the ownership and to this organization. And if they're not aware of that, hopefully someone's told them. I think they were a little bit more represented last week with the Browns fans against Pittsburgh, but still, it is something to be concerned about because if you bring Stefanski back, you are already going into next season with a negative. Fans are already preparing to lose again next year. That's how they feel, and until you change that, until Stefanski can prove that he can win, you're not gonna bring the fans back, and organizations got to be thinking about down the line again with this dome. How are you going to fill that dome up? I mean, obviously there's a lot of rich people out there and they can buy a lot of seats up, but I don't think you want to block out all the great fans that the Browns have over these decades. There are hundreds and thousands of Browns fans that have given up their season tickets over the last several seasons, not only because suck, but because of things like the Deshaun Watson trade. So they've got to get it corrected. Rod Bloom and his brother Jeff were on their Browns Blitz the other day talking about this circus that the Browns are. And they reiterated that it's not just a circus since Shedeur Sanders has been here. It's been a circus for many years. When Baker was here, even before then, the the uh, the musical chairs of coaches. It's got to stop. And some of you will say, well, then stop it by keep the coach in play, keep that stability. It's not stable though. That's my thing. It's not stable. I mean, if you like stability and the fact that we're being consistent and losing again, I guess you can call that stability. But that's really a loser sort of way of looking at things. If you're fine with getting 3 wins, 5 wins, 6 wins every season, great. But you're going to lose a lot more fans, and you're going to even lose a fan like me. We don't want to lose. We don't want to give up on the Browns, but the Browns have got to start making some better decisions as an organization. And I think that's what Rod and his brother Jeff were talking about in the Browns splits the other day. So we'll see. In the meantime, I did want to finish just a little bit with Shedeur. That overall right now he's 2 wins, 4 losses as a starter. His completion percentage is pretty low right now. It's 57%. He's thrown for almost 1,300 yards. He's got 7 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. So that's not very good. He's also been sacked a little bit. He's been sacked 17 times now in 7 games. Okay, so he hasn't been that bad as far as, go back and you look at the actual individual games. He was sacked the first game against Baltimore. He was sacked twice. Once the following game, three times the next game, twice the next game. It was the game against Chicago where he got sacked five times. The last two games, he's been sacked twice in each of those games. He's thrown the deep ball pretty consistently. He's had multiple passes over, 20 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards. He's actually been rushing the ball pretty consistently over the last four games. If you go back and look at his stat line over the last four games, he had three rushes for 29 yards, two two carries for 24 yards the next game, four carries for 49 yards, and four carries for 20 yards. And he had runs of 14 yards, 15 yards, 16 yards, and 11 yards. So the kid can get out there. He can move. And the other part of this too, and I know Joel and I talked about it on his show, but his dad Dion has been in the building the last several games. I think this was his third game he watched him play, and or fourth game maybe. And he was dressed to a T. He had his girlfriend with him. Prime time, his was there. You just wonder, right? You just wonder with Black Monday coming up, if he is, if they decide to part, Stefanski does, would Dion be the guy? Would Dion come in? Would Dion take over the reins? Obviously, his son and he have had a good run of things when they were at Jackson State, when they went to Colorado. So the two of them have worked together a lot, and it's his kid. So we'll see what happens. I know that probably wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world, but I think it would certainly get the fans more energized and more. I'm not sure if they would be all on board with it, but they would certainly be talking more again here in Cleveland. The Browns are the center of the universe. It would continue that conversation. So I would be all for it. I've said that before. I don't think you have anything to lose at this point. Some people will say, oh, you're losing your respectability or you're losing consistency or stability. But who, at this point, who cares? You've done some good things with the rookie class and the kids that you brought in. Mason Graham, Harold Fannin, Quinshon Junkins. By the way, before I leave, Quinshon Junkins, had a really good year. But I listened to Rod and Jeff the other day talk about on the Brown Splits about Rashid Sanders, Rocket Sanders. And I agree with Jeff's take. He said that when he sees Rashid Sanders run, he sees little glimpses of Nick Chubb. And I couldn't agree more. I said the same damn thing when I watched him run as well. He's a very interesting player, and I think the Browns would be wise in using him more as they go into this next season. I hope that the Browns are aware of his talent. He did score the first touchdown for the Browns this season. I don't know if you knew that, everybody. And to go back and look at the stats, he actually played in game one when Quinshon Junkins was still sitting out or hadn't agreed to his contract. So, well, I like Quinshon Junkins, and I think that he's a very good running back. He's a different type of running back than like what we're used to. And I think maybe that's part of this conversation is that Rashid Sanders kind of reminds me, at least, of Nick Chubb. So that's more of a favorable position for me when I'm thinking about these running backs. And while I think Quinshon Junkins is obviously the long term answer for the Browns, it would be interesting to see if the Browns would involve Rashid Sanders more in that backfield, especially going in the next year. I don't know what you have to lose, so we'll see. But we'll be going down there on Sunday. Looking forward to that. Never been to the Bungle Stadium. I forget what they call it, Paycor or some weird name down there. Where the Bungles they don't even clean off their seats with snow or whatever. They're a very cheap organization, and you hear that directly from Bengals fans themselves. Cincinnati, they're not a football town. They are all about their baseball team, the Cincinnati Reds. They're kind of like St. Louis. St. Louis is all about baseball. And the St. Louis Cardinals, Cincinnati, same thing. So the Bengals are kind of a second thought to most. That's why it's such a crap thing that they made the Super Bowl a few years ago, because they're not into football like us Browns fans are. And I mean, there's a few Cincinnati Bengals fans that I respect. I actually work with some, and I'll respect them and their takes on things like Cincinnati chili. But outside of that, most Bengals fans are just happy-go-lucky. They're not really invested in, like we Browns fans are. That's what, we take pride as Browns fans, that we are more invested than most fan bases across the globe, because we're the Browns. Win or shine, uh, rain or shine, not win, rain or shine. We're just more dedicated. So, all right, folks. I hope the Browns win. I'm driving down there, so they better damn well win. It's supposed to be relatively mild there. It's like 35, 40 degrees, sunny, not a lot of wind. So maybe to be one of those high scoring games where they're throwing the ball over the place. But hopefully the Browns come away with a win. The Browns defense plays strong. And then after that, we'll see what happens. What will happen to Kevin Stefanski? What will happen with the rest of the coaching staff? Who will be fired first? Will Kevin Stefanski not be fired or not fired? We'll find out. Everybody, thanks for joining the Johnny Cleveland podcast. We'll see you next time. And remember, too, that's right, keep smiling. Go Browns.